So those are some of the things that we think about when we think about folk culture. And that's the folk there is from the German word that it comes from the people. So you're working every day and you're making something that's for use, basically. But everyone makes that thing for use the same way, and it becomes kind of a tradition, folk tradition.
Architecture, too.
Architecture then too, yep, architecture would fit into that. Now, high culture, as opposed to low culture, is, when I state here, artistic entertainment, in the idea of entertainment being things like the arts, music, when you think of going to orchestra, concerts, or going to an art gallery, Minnesota Institute of Arts, those types of things, material artifacts associated with a society. So when you have especially an agricultural society, and you don't have a lot of technology, you spend most of your life trying to survive, right? You spend most of your time farming, raising animals, slaughtering animals, bringing in harvest, preparing for winter, especially around here, preparing for winter so you have food all winter long. And you don't have much time to do anything else. You live or you die. That's kind of all you get. Those are your choices. Now, there's an interesting book some of you might be interested in. It's by a man named Josef Pieper, but it's German, so it's Josef, Josef. And he wrote a book called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. So when people have free time, what do they do with their free time? Well, now it's not just that you have to make a chair to sit in, because you need some place to sit. Well, now you can actually make a chair that's more than functional. You can make a chair that's actually beautiful, that has very high craft. You can go back in and do it again and make it even better. You can take a table and make it not just so it stands up if you're lucky and has a rock under one leg, but now you can actually fix the table. You can improve the strength of the table, the architecture of the table. You might be able to do some inlay in the table. You might be able to do some finery on the legs. You now start to build nice pieces of furniture. And you can see this especially in the furniture industry over the last 150 years, where in furniture like dressers and bed frames and all those kinds of things, where as the United States began to become a little bit more comfortable with that, except for that era with the Great Depression, all of that began to become, you could see, here's a standard model, this chest of drawers will hold your stuff. And just don't pull too hard on the drawer. And then you get into better quality stuff and prettier stuff and finer quality woods and finishes and all of those things till you have these upper ends of furniture. When people have, in the past, when people had time on their hands, they would make things beautiful. And in the making of things beautiful, ornate, that was an expression of their worldview. And I think at some point we're going to look at more concrete examples of what I mean by this. But it begins, that expression is an expression of their worldview. Same with the folk culture. The folk culture is an expression of their worldview. The high culture is also an expression of their worldview. The third type of culture is popular culture, and this is particularly true in the early 20th century of the United States. It almost becomes a United States phenomenon that we then spread throughout the world, unfortunately. But popular culture is here defined as the material culture, so material being material things, of a particular society, generally, almost always, mass-produced for the common person. The focus of popular culture is the lowest common denominator. Okay, popular culture came out, again, out of the affluence of the United States in the early 1900s and leisure time. And so in the United States, we ended up in a weird situation with our leisure time. We could either continue to make things beautiful, which takes hard work. The minority of people are talented enough to actually do it. It takes a lot of money, but we could produce something that lasted for centuries. Or we could invest our time in popular culture, which was easy and appealed to everyone and could be mass produced. And in a way was actually based on immaturity instead of maturity. I have one short definition. Popular culture, quote, is not the degradation of taste, but its immaturity. It is democratized. That is, it's brought down to the lowest common denominator. So it's called art, but it's art that has to be able to be consumed by everyone, those who don't know any better and don't want to know any better. Those who are, to bring it back around full circle, those who are there and don't want to be dragged outside to see reality. That's what popular culture was designed for. So I just kind of showed a bias on that. All right, so those are some key terms. Next week, I think we might look more into these key terms and look at some finer distinctions. But we might also get into Proverbs. So if you can, try to read through the book of Proverbs this week. And if we don't get to it next week, then you can read it again. And that won't hurt. It won't hurt. Won't hurt you, I promise. And we'll talk about it at that time. So any questions? This isn't the introductory lectures are not always the most exciting. Any comments?
I thought you were going to say, it's like the Christian life. Your eyes are open and you're out in the sun and everything, you know the Lord and you wanted other people to know it. And you try to drag them out and they beat you up and kill you.
It is a fair analogy, yes, it is. So that's all right. Pastor?
So just one connection with that, and that is that not always do people who you try to drag around the corner and outside, not always do they respond with violence.
Right.
Normally large groups do. If you get a large group, then that group is going to gravitate toward violence. But individuals tend to have a graded reaction. Sometimes they ignore, sometimes they argue, sometimes if those two don't work, then they kill you.
Yep.
But usually groups do go the mob.
Yes, yeah, they do, especially nowadays. It's easier.
It's easier. Yeah.
Easier.
It does.
It's hard to stand out and be the only one. Dr. Hauser, Charles Hauser, I don't know if you guys know who he was. He was my professor for many years. I worked for him at the seminary. He was only about this tall, a little German fellow. And his wife, Anne, attended a Baptist Bible college down in Texas, in which the president of that college was embroiled in some controversy, moral controversy. And he did one of these things where he said, you're with me or you're against me. And in a chapel, he said, if you're against me, I want you to stand up. And she was sitting in the front row. And she stood up. She didn't know if anybody else stood up. She was not only in the front row, but she didn't know if anyone else stood up. Until all the students who had stood up were dismissed from school. They were kicked out. And when she turned around to leave the chapel, that's when she saw that there were some other students who had stood up also. yeah, it takes a lot of discipline to be that person, to stand up in the midst of a crowd and be the only one. Okay. Well, we'll close in a word of prayer. Brian, would you like to close us today?